Hi, I made this video and the other one with Ed. Otherwise, I have absolutely nothing to do with him.
Motorcycles when I move along. I got a friend who fixes them, though I said I'd write this song. I use 3 chords and I'll try to make it rhyme, but don't get your hopes up, they didn't give me too much time. I remember American bikes, but now there's just one left. Gotta be big and mean to buy one and go way into debt. And there were British bikes that you took on down the road.
Hi, motorcycle lovers. What we'll be doing this time is the wheel. We'll be taking the tire off from the rim and the rim off from the hub. The reason we're doing this for this customer is he would like to have installed stainless steel spokes and nipples. But other times that you do this is if you've damaged your rim, or if you're doing a restoration and you want to replate a steel rim, or you wish to use your original spokes and nipples but they're rusty and you want to get them plated. The first thing we'll be doing is taking the wheel off the bike. Now most of that's covered in your manual, but there is one trick, and that is to give us more clearance between the fender and the ground. We're going to raise the bike up higher. Take a 2x4 about this long, put it under the center stand, so most of it's standing on one side. Tilt the bike, slide it under there, cross over the other side of the bike, tilt it up, and with your heel, kick it back. That will now give us enough space here to easily remove the wheel. Just a comment, when you reinstall the axle, you want to make sure that it's thoroughly greased, as this one already is. If you drop the axle on the ground, then you want to wipe it and put new grease on it. Another note, on the back wheel on the BMW are the splines that engage the differential. Putting some grease in here, and I believe there is a special BMW grease for it. Putting the grease on the splines in here will minimize wear to them. You'll find it easier to put the grease on the differential. We'll be breaking the tire free from the rim. You need to do that. To do that, you have to let the air out of the tube. The easiest way is to remove the valve core. Continental, on their tubes, come with a valve cap. It's a metal one that has a valve core tool as part of it. Most other tubes have them, but they're a plastic cap. You take the tool, insert it in the valve stem, and unscrew it. And here's the core. By the way, sometimes the cause of a flat tire is a leaking valve core. So I suggest, before you remove the wheel from the bike, before you remove the core from the stem, that you check that. The way you do that is to put a little bit of water or a little bit of spit inside the valve stem and watch it very carefully to see if a bubble forms. If a bubble does form, then either your core is loose and should be tightened, or it's leaking and should be replaced. This is a tube type tire, and the tire comes away from the rim very easily. If this were a tubeless tire, breaking the tire away from the rim would be much more difficult. So one of the ways to do that is using a vise. Take a piece of wood, put it on the back side of the vise, open the vise enough so the tire will fit in here. Piece of wood is going to protect the rim from the back jar on the vise. And all you need to do is close the vise, on the tire until it breaks free from the rim. Once you've done this side, take the wheel out, turn it around, and do it again to break the other side free. When levering the tire off, what you want to avoid, which somebody else has done, is leaving gouge marks. On tube tires are ugly. On tubeless tires, they can ruin your seal. To avoid that, you can use a rim protector, a piece of hose, a slit in it, and that you slide over the rim to protect it when we'll be levering. Making one is very simple. Go to the hardware store, buy a piece of tubing. Black rubber, clear, whatever you like. About this size. Cut off a piece. And then slit it up the side. Okay, first take the nut off of the valve stem. Then put your 3 rim protectors on the side of the rim near the valve stem. And I spread them about like that. To help get the tire off the rim, we lubricate the joint between them. You can use either a 50-50 mixture of detergent and water, or what works a little better, but is much harder to come by, is tire mounting lubricant. I have it in a old spray bottle. Which I spray around the tire, and then working on the valve core side, I put my knees on the tire opposite that, dropping the bead of the tire into the U-shaped cup of the rim. That allows a little clearance for the tire to move over towards the valve stem side. and then putting the tire irons. Now, I am using the ones from the BMW toolkit. Putting the tire irons on the rim protectors. I lever back till the tire clears the rim. I do it again with another one, and then moving the other one to the other side, I lever off another piece of the tire. Now I keep doing this, moving the rim protectors, inserting the tire irons until the rim comes easily free, until the tire comes easily free of the rim. Now, I reach inside and grab the tube, work the valve stem through the rim, and pull the inner tube out. There's a rim protector here on this side and a tire iron that I've worked through from this side. Lever the tire iron, and then push down on the tire until it comes off of the rim. While it is possible to take off a tire with the tire irons that BMW gives you, larger ones, longer ones, are much easier to use. Now we're going to start taking the rim off from the hub. Now, before we do that, we want to measure something. We want to measure the distance from the machine surface on the edge of the hub to the edge of the rim, the vertical distance. Over the years, on the very different wheels that BMW or any other company has, this distance will vary from model to model. Or, for instance, if you have a steel rim versus an aluminum alloy rim, that distance might vary. And BMW supplied a large number of special tools for measuring that distance and for setting it when we go to put the rim back on. This is one page with some of these special tools for the different bikes. Here's another page for the R51.3, the R50, 60, 69, etc. This is a tool you can make. It's made of 2 pieces of steel, 1/8 inch thick by 1/2 inch or 1.5 inches. It's not terribly important. And 4 bolts. The middle 2 are 5/16 with nice flat heads. And the outer 2 are 1/4 inch carriage bolts. There are 2 ways to set this tool. One way is, if you have what you know is a good rim and wheel combination, you just set the tool on the machine surface and diddle around with the 1/4 inch bolts, slide in and out until they are both just touching the rim. And then tighten up the nut to lock it in position. If you don't have a good rim, then you need to take the numbers that the factory gives you on their prints and I'll be enclosing a sheet with those specifications in the video, and taking your tool, laying it on a straight edge, measure the gap, and then again diddle with your bolts until everything is even and at the right height. Instead of using the dial caliper, you can use a feeler gauge. When you're done setting the fixture, either on a good rim wheel or on a setting straight edge, we'll set it aside for now, and we'll use it as a guide later when we put the rim back on the hub. You need to be able to spin the wheel when we do this process. And a quick and easy thing to make to help this is take a block of wood and drill a hole in it a little bit smaller than the axle in this area of the axle, and then slip the wood, the block, down the middle. What we do is we put it in the vise with the axle in it. And then we put the wheel on it. And this allows us to work on the wheel conveniently. Before we take the rim off, we want to mark where the spokes are going into the hub. How the wheel has been laced, in other words. Starting at the spoke hole and going clockwise, on the rim, put a little dot of nail polish in the corresponding hole that it goes to in the hub. On the next spoke, put 2 dots. And on its corresponding hole in the hub, put 2 dots. On the third one, put 3 dots. And the fourth one, 4. That's the pattern that the wheel is laced in. All the other groups will follow from that first group. So the first spoke will go here. The fifth spoke will be essentially parallel to it. The ninth spoke, and so on. That's how we will reassemble the wheel, how we will lace the wheel when we go to back on. Or in this case, when we install the stainless steel spokes. Here I am taking off the rim strip. In this case, the rim strip is tape. Mostly what you'll find is that the rim strip is a piece of rubber. The rim strip is to protect the tube from from being punctured by the nipples. This is a spoke wrench, and it's of course used to turn the nipples. Spoke wrenches come in different sizes. These are labeled 8, 9, 10, and 11. The ones that fit this rim is the number 10. Once you've loosened the spoke with the spoke wrench, to make it go a little faster, you can then unscrew the nipple the rest of the way with a screwdriver. And then we keep doing this until we have all the nipples out and we can remove the hub. If you have a difficult to remove nipple, what you may need to do is use both the spoke wrench and the screwdriver when you first start to turn it. If you have a difficult to remove nipple, skip it. Release as many as you can, and that'll take tension off that difficult to remove one, and then you may be able to get it easier. This is what you'd like to avoid. BMW stock nipples are a relatively soft brass, chrome plated. To avoid this, you should have a spoke wrench that fits snugly around the nipple. To get the kind of fit I wanted, I took a slightly undersized spoke wrench and I filed it until I got the fit that I wanted. Also, when you are unscrewing the nipples, it will help if you heat them up. Then they may be easier to take off from the spokes. The next step in the process is to lace the wheel up. That means we're going to install, but not true or even tighten up very much, all the spokes. We start with the hub and we locate the first spoke hole, which has the single dot that we marked when we took the wheel apart. And we align that with the first spoke hole on the rim clockwise from the valve stem hole. By a line, I mean that when we put the spoke in, it lines up with the spoke hole in the rim. If you're using a new rim, lay it on top of the old rim in the same orientation and transfer the nail polish marks to the new rim. We were going over the case where we're just replacing spokes. But let's talk about a situation where you have a hub and you're going to put a new rim on, or you've gotten a basket case which has this hub and the spokes and the rim all separate. There is a question of getting the rim flopped over to the correct side. What I mean by that is you might want to lace up the hub with the rim this way or this way. It's possible to do it both ways, but only one way is right. How to figure out the right way is what we'll be going over right now. The easiest way, if you have an exact match, is to line up the valve holes. And look at the first nipple hole right after the valve hole. Now the way this is oriented right now, this nipple hole is higher than this one. This one is up this way, and this one is not as far up this way. On the rim that is already on the wheel that we're replacing, this nipple hole is lower than this nipple hole. So to get this oriented properly, we flip that over, and now we see that this nipple hole is lower than this one. As it is down here, this one is lower than this one. So now we would mark our nipples here and correspondingly on the new rim that we'll be putting in. Look at the pattern on the hub. Here's a spoke, and here's where it comes into the hub, right there. And here's a spoke that it crosses over. And here is where this spoke goes into the hub. This spot is higher up this way, further than this spoke is. If we look at the rim, this dimple on the rim is higher this way than this one. The one that comes from the high spot on the hub goes to the high spot on the rim. The low spot on the hub goes to the low spot on the rim. Before we put the nipple on, put a little bit of glue on the threads of the spoke. This glue was provided by the spoke manufacturers, Buchanan. But Loctite's anti-seize will serve just as well. Some people suggest putting a little bit of oil here so they spin freely when you're putting them in. I'm not going to do that on this wheel. It makes me a little worried that oil will be left over on the rim, soak the tube, and do damage to it. Putting the first spoke in, run it down so there are maybe 4 or 5 threads left exposed here. And we'll do that all around so that all the spokes have about the same number of threads sticking out from the nipple. Skipping 1, 2, 3 to the 4th nipple hole after the one we just finished, and going to the next hole on the hub that's at about the same angle, or is at the same angle as that one. We put our next spoke in. And so we go all the way around with this first group of spokes. When building the wheel, use a little common sense. Make sure that the groups that you're putting in of spokes is not the top layer. It's easiest to lace the wheel up is if you do the inner spokes first. You can see that this hole is beneath this hole. And so if we do this group of spokes before this one, we won't have to try and work underneath. Okay, doing the next group of spokes, from this side is the one I marked with 3 marks, and that'll align to the rim that has 3 marks, or the third 1, 2, 3 spoke hole from the nipple. So, in goes the spoke, crossing over the other one, making it a little bit easier, and threading it into the nipple. Putting a little bit of the glue on each of the spokes. And again, threading it in. On stainless steel spokes, you just have to use glue. It'll gall the threads. What that means is it'll tear little bits of metal off otherwise. And I shouldn't have to tell you that that's not a terribly good practice. And dipping the spoke into the anti-seize. Turning the wheel over and locating the spoke hole that has the 2 dots on it. We'll run a spoke from there to the nipple hole. Now that I turn the wheel over, that nipple hole is now 2 holes clockwise, counterclockwise of the valve stem hole. And the last group, which is sort of self-evident where they'll go. 1, 2, 3, 4th hole there, and over here we have the 4 little nail polish marks. I don't go wildly mixing and matching hubs and rims. The angles that these holes are drilled at need to be in the correct place so that the spoke lines up with the rim. If the rim is smaller, this angle changes. If the rim is bigger, it also changes. Okay, the wheel is laced up, but as you can see, all the spokes are loose. So what I'll be doing now is going around, starting in a convenient place, the valve hole, and giving each of these nipples maybe 4 or 5 turns, and then I may go around a second time and give them 1 or 2 turns until this play is gone, but I have roughly equally run the nipples onto the spokes. The easiest way is probably with the screwdriver. So in this case, what I'm doing, just because it's convenient, is I'm running the nipples all the way up to the thread, all the way up the threads, so the threads are no longer visible. Some people suggest that you seat the spokes into the wheel hub by tapping on them a few times. This is a little tool I've made for indicating against the rim, and we'll see how it's used in a moment. I attach it to a magnetic base that's used with dial indicators. You may have to rig up a piece of wood or a clamp type arrangement to hold it next to the rim. Here it is installed, and you can see that our rim needs some work. Now, the spokes right now are snugged up, but we need to true it. At the same time, we true it in this direction and in this direction. We also need to keep track, with the tool we made earlier, the position of the rim with respect to the hub. So right now, the rim needs to go over that way. See the gap here? We need to move the rim that way. So let's find the spots where it's furthest away from our tool. From here, you can see, to here. That's where it's far away. And you can hear from the rubbing sound that it's also high this way. So what we want to do is tighten up the spokes on this side of the wheel. I use my hands on the spokes that I'm going to work between. I'm going to work between these spokes. Also, you can assume that the spokes in the middle of the group, from where your hands are the ones that you're going to turn slightly more. So I may turn right now these nipples 2 turns. The ones near where my hands were, where the run out is small, I'm only turning them 1 turn now. Okay. If you have good control over this tool, an excellent aid is to keep moving it in so that it rubs. Right here, for instance. Here it's rubbing on the top. Here it's rubbing on the side. So I'll tighten up again the spokes on that side. As you can see, we're getting closer. The important information we want is coming from that gap. You can also hear it. There's a point right there where it's rubbing. Here it's not rubbing. Here it is. In that spot where it's rubbing, we want to correct that. In this case, it's going up this way, high. To correct that, we tighten up the spokes on both sides of the rim, and that'll bring the rim down this way. And we start, find where the noise is, find where it isn't, right about here. Here's the noise. No noise. Well, no noise. Noise. No noise. I have my hand where the first place that there was noise, no noise. And the second place is here. I count the number of spokes between those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spokes. And I give each of those spokes a quarter or a half a turn. Now with that up and down noise gone, I reposition my tool and I go after the side. Here's it scraping. Here. And here. Now I have the choice of bringing those places that are not scraping over this way, or those places that are scraping over this way. And I decide that based on this tool again. So checking in a few places with this tool that we made earlier, I see that there's a slight gap here. I want to bring the rim over this way. So that means I'll tighten up the spokes on this side of the rim. So my tool will not be scraping. So I find a place that's scraping, and I tighten the spokes on this side so they don't scrape. Now, to give you some idea of how tight the spokes are to be, you can get an idea using your spoke wrench and the scale. About this torque stuff, I'm trying to get across how much to tighten the nipples. This is something that comes with experience. For those of you without this experience, I'm giving you some approximate numbers to substitute for it. The stainless nipples will work well with about 70-75 inch-pounds. The stock BMW brass nipples work with about 40-45 inch-pounds. These numbers are only guidelines until you develop your own feel. If you over-tighten the nipple, it will deform. If you under-tighten the nipples, the spokes will come loose as you drive the bike. We need to know how hard to turn our wrench. An approximate way to figure that out is to determine the torque that we're exerting. That is equal to the length of our wrench times the force that we are pushing or pulling, let's say pulling, the wrench. So we can measure the length of our wrench with a ruler. And I'm going to go from here to here, and let's say it's 4 inches. This is about 4 inches. We can measure the force by using the scale here. Now, the torque that we want, as I said before, on a 600cc or larger bike is about 70 inch-pounds. And we'll make this in inches. Dividing 4 into 70, that's about 17 and a half pounds. Here I have the setup, 4 inches about from here to here. And pulling in the same plane as the wrench, I can see that the nipple starts to turn at about 16 here. I'm not going to measure each one, but now I know about what 70 inch-pounds is. And so I'll feel each of the nipples and see that it's about the same. And I may go around on all the nipples and turn them slightly to bring it up to 17 and a half or so. As we get very close to being finished, I've traded my little tool in for a dial indicator. The book calls for 8 thousandths run out this way, 0.2 millimeters, and 40 thousandths this way, 1 millimeter. With an old rim that has score marks on it from tire irons, that's virtually impossible to achieve. The new rim you can, so do the best you can. The other measure then would be coming down from the top. I know you can't see the dial indicator, but you're allowed 40 thousandths this way. Also, you want to make sure that after you've built the wheel, you haven't pulled the brake drum out of round. So I mount the dial indicator so it's reading the roundness of the brake drum as I turn the wheel. This one's very good. There were no numbers in the book. A few thousandths, couple, 2, 3, 4 is probably fine. If it's getting more than that, you may have to deal with getting something done to the drum. You also want to make sure that the spokes are not protruding through the nipples here. If they are, you need to grind them off. Otherwise you'll have a flat tire and be very unhappy about it. And then check with your tool to make sure all the points are properly lined up. Now it's time to remount the tire. First, make sure that your rim is clean. No metal particles left in here or other sort of grunge. Wipe it with a rag or whatever it takes to get it clean. First thing we'll be putting on is a rim strip. We can either use a rubber one or 3 turns of duct tape will work quite well also. Now I'm lining up the valve stem hole in the rim with the one in the rim strip. It's just like a big rubber band. Okay, now we'll mount the tire. Now, most tires these days have directional arrows on them. This one says driving wheel and front wheel. There's a rear wheel. If the bike were over here, the bike would be facing in that direction, going forward that way. The wheel would be rotating in this direction. And we'd like to get the side that says driving wheel going in that same direction. So we'll be mounting these like so. And many tires will have a red spot, sometimes up here, wherever. We align the red spot on the tire with the valve core hole on the rim. Lubricate up the tire with your soap solution or your proprietary lubricant. Drop one part of the tire into the well of the wheel. One bead over the tire. And here I put one of my rim protectors in, and I work a tire iron up over here. And there's the first bead. Over the rim. Inflate the inner tube just a little bit to give it enough shape to help you avoid pinching it as we put it in. But don't put so much air in it that it's going to be difficult to get the tire over the rim. Well, maybe about that much. Never use a patch tube. It's even a good idea to use a new tube whenever you reinstall a tire. A little talc on the tube will aid in keeping the tube from sticking to itself and getting folded over and ultimately pinched after you've installed it. Some tubes come already powdered. I can't remember which ones. I think the Michelin ones do. Okay. Now we find the spoke hole and push the tube in and then bring the valve back out. It's a little awkward doing this. Actually, it hurts a little bit with your hands. You reach down in there. Bring it through and take the nut and thread on a few turns to keep the core, to keep the valve stem from pulling back through. And then work the rest of the tube into the tire. Lubricate it again on this side. Work the lubricant onto this area here, and also a little bit underneath here. Starting opposite the valve core, just carefully drop in the bead of the tire. And then work it around towards the stem, using your knees at this end to keep the tire in the well. Now, at some point you'll need your tire irons again to get this in. You have to be very careful not to pinch the tube. It's very easy to do that. Then insert your rim protectors. And using a tire iron, put on top of one of your rim protectors. Don't take too big a bite. Big bites are really hard, so keep them small. And carefully feel that you're not pinching your tube. Lever the bead over the rim and bring it out. And we'll do it again over here. And the last one, you need to be the most cautious of. So as not to pinch the tube. The last little bit you can often work in just by pushing on it. And make sure you don't leave any of your rim protectors in the wheel. Okay, now we inflate the tire, which is easiest to do with an air compressor, but I'll do it with the pump. And we want to make sure that the bead is properly seated. Right here's the bead. You can see that as it goes around. And when it's properly seated, it will be the same distance all the way around from here to the bead. Push the valve stem back up so that you know it's not caught by the tire. If you want to be very cautious, you can look in between the tire and the rim, where my finger is, and make sure that the tube is not visible. If it is, just work it in. It'll go in if you work it a little bit. Run the nut up and inflate the tire. After you've used your newly built wheels for a couple hundred miles, you should check the spokes for tension. You can do that by listening to them. Tight ones sound like this. Loose ones have a dead sound to them. Tighten up the loose ones if you have any. Another point is, this rim, which is used, is in relatively good condition. You may be working on an older bike that has some dings or some bent places in the rim. Those are very difficult to true. What you may find that you need to do is find those bent spots and beat on them with a hammer, a lead hammer or something of that nature. You can recognize those spots when you're spinning the rim around. You'll see all of a sudden a big move, a big glitch. And you may only see it on the one side. The other side will seem to be reasonably true. There are many ways to balance a wheel. This is a bubble balancer. You can see the bubble here. When we have the wheel balanced, we'll have that bubble in the bullseye. There's a cone here and another cone here. And I put that through the wheel. And with the second cone, I thread that on from the back side. And now I take the wheel and I hang it from this arm. And I will take weights and put them on the rim until I find the right spot and the right number of weights so that that bubble is in the middle. Here's my lifelong collection of wheel weights. Some of these, this is a BMW one, go onto the spokes. The wheel weights that are attached to the rim are done with two-sided sticky tape that has a bit of foam. I put weights on the rim until the bubble is centered, and then I mark where those weights go, a little bit of chalk, and put the two-sided sticky tape here, and then the weight on the rim. Another type of balancer is a roll balancer. The wheel is mounted vertically. There's an axle through the wheel, and the wheel will just rotate until the heavy spot is on the bottom. You add weight to the top. You give this wheel a slight spin, and if it stops randomly, each time that you spin it, you do it half a dozen times. If it stops randomly, then it's properly balanced. If it always stops at the same spot down, then you need a little more weight opposite it. If you want to keep oil, differential oil, off your brake shoes, keep this hole clean. Use a wire and ram it up there. You can see this one's pretty dirty. Until all the crud comes out. Now /2s have this hole also. And later bikes have a second hole here, which you can also keep clean with a wire.
I like to ride